Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this VisionWare webinar entitled MDM, a Framework for Success, where we're going to be discussing how best to create successful business outcomes from MDM projects. By way of introduction, my name is David Struth, and I'm the Head of Marketing at VisionWare, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. I'm delighted today to be joined by two real thought leaders in the MDM space. Gary Barnett, who is the Chief Software Analyst at independent IT analyst firm Ovum, and our Chief Technology Officer, Phung. Thanks very much for joining me today, gentlemen. In terms of logistics for the session today, the session's going to last around about an hour. We're going to save some time at the end for Q&A, so please feel free to send through questions at any point over the course of this session using your control panel, and we'll attempt to answer them at the end. If we don't manage to answer them during the session, we'll obviously get back to you. So without further ado, let me pass you on to Gary Barnett of Ovum, who's going to be offering his unique take on knowing what you need to know about shaping MDM success.
Thanks, David. So if we move on to the next slide. So at the heart of this is this idea of knowing what you know, and the next slide shows a famous quote from Donald Rumsfeld, where he talked about there being known knowns, the things that we know as an organization. Then there's those known unknowns, the things that we don't know, the areas where we're looking to garner more insight. And he talked with great concern about these unknown unknowns, the things that we don't know. What he'd forgotten to add, and that this is subsequently added by a fairly radical philosopher called Slavoj Žižek, is this extra category of unknown knowns. And for me, this is the challenge that most of my clients face. We have this knowledge sitting in our organization somewhere, but no way of bringing it to bear at the right time and in the right format for the decisions that we need to make. And this is happening in the context of a massive data bonanza that's going to be illustrated on the next slide, which starts with the wonderful world. If we move on one slide, it starts with the wonderful world of cloud and all of the possibilities that creates to enable us to gain access to new sources of data, to enable us to gain more information and insight into the behavior of our customers, the way our suppliers operate. There's a massive evolution in the technology that enables us to actually crunch that data. So the domain of big data and analytics is represented by a Winchester disk drive from the 1980s there. And of course, mobility, and not just mobility. When I talk about mobility, I'm not just talking about telephones and tablets, but also the emerging Internet of Things, where give us new ways both of making use of data and displaying data and putting it to work for us, but also new ways of gathering data and collecting it. And the final four in this set is the world of social networks. And I'm always faintly embarrassed when I look at those logos, because at one time or another I think I've been signed up to pretty much every single one of those platforms. But the world of social is creating volumes of data that, if we could correlate that with what we already know that we know, would enable us to have a far better understanding of what's on the minds of our current clients and customers, but also what's on the mind of future potential prospects. So we move on to the next slide. Here's a really crucial point. Data is absolutely worthless until it actually provokes us to do something. We've got stories, for example, in the domain of smart metering, where electricity companies, utility companies are deploying smart meters which gather all sorts of really useful data about the technical quality of the electricity supply. And currently, they just discard that data because they've actually got no way of putting it to work and actually acting upon it. So it's absolutely fundamental truism of data is that it's worthless until it provokes some kind of action, whether that's in helping you better understand your customers so that you can actually then figure out which products or services to deploy. In manufacturing and logistics, the use of data to really understand how our businesses are operating so that we can make our current processes more efficient, and in some domains where margins can be as narrow as fractions of 1%, a tiny bit of additional efficiency can make a huge difference to our profitability. And of course there's the broader story about how better to understand our market and develop a better strategy to enable us to face up to that market. The next slide makes another point, which is that data is sociable. It's great to have one solid line of data, but in fact, and I'll move on to the next slide to save you having to stare at my poor graphic design skills for too long. The value of data is more than multiplied each time you correlate it with another related data source. So in the context of sales and marketing, understanding what your customers have bought in the past is a crucial piece of data. But if you can tie that in with better understanding of future buying intentions, that the combined data set is more than twice as valuable. So making sure that we can link and correlate data in an effective way is a fundamental part of becoming a data-enabled business that genuinely knows what it knows. So the next slide looks to define our destination, and if you imagine our destination is the summit of Everest, we want an organization that genuinely knows what it knows, that can act on that information, that can readily adapt and engage with new data sources and correlate those in a meaningful way. The summit is clearly defined and it's there before us. But if you ask someone who's actually climbed Everest how long it takes, how long does it take to climb Everest, the chances are they'll tell you it takes about 4.5 years. Of course, they're only in Everest for a couple of months, and indeed, most people are only on the mountain itself for a relatively small number of days. But our journey to summiting Everest starts with deciding to take that journey, making a commitment to achieve that goal. And then we have to do an awful lot of stuff that, frankly, some of which is going to feel tedious and boring and hard, but it's all the stuff that we need to do in order to get on that journey. Getting ready to summit Everest is as much about getting fit, eating the right food, training, learning the technical skills associated with climbing a mountain, as it is hopping on the plane to Nepal and racing up the slopes. And we do a lot of work with our clients in helping them start this journey. And the work we do is typically very, very practical and very straightforward. If you move on to the next slide, this is where most of our clients are. They're figuring out the extent of the challenge that they face. They're figuring out where those data sources exist, how many of them exists. I've had clients tell me that they, before they started their MDM journey, they believed they had 30 or 40 key databases, and when they did some analysis, they discovered that in the number of databases that were going to be important and significant in this journey rose in a couple of cases to well over 100. So starting is about figuring out exactly where you are, doing that fitness check, auditing, understanding that many of your key organizational decisions are probably being made on the back of what we call feral data, which is data that sloshes around your organization in Excel spreadsheets, in long email chains, and that harnessing that and putting that to work and making that part of your overall data strategy is as crucial a part of the journey as deploying an awesome user interface that's tablet and smartphone enabled. So the next slide is a slide that I use all the time, and I'm developing a bit of a reputation as being the broccoli guy. But the analogy here is from my childhood. I was never allowed to have my dessert until I'd eaten my broccoli. And our challenge is to figure out the basic dull stuff that we need to get done, and to find the tools that are going to enable us to achieve that that core fitness work, so that we can eat our greens before we move on to dessert. The next slide acknowledges the fact that actually, of course, we need tools and technology to help us. but I can promise you that if we were climbing up the side of a glacier and you were relying on my ability to use an ice axe effectively for your safety, you'd be in grave danger. There's a certain element, even something as simple as an ice axe, of training, of using the tool properly and effectively, that we've got to engage with as well. So it's this combination of doing the stuff, frankly, that we all know we should do. You know, a lot of this stuff isn't about me bringing you alarming new insights. It's about encouraging you to remember the core stuff that you have to do. If you could see me in person, you'd know that I could probably lose a couple of kilograms, or maybe even a dozen kilograms. And I know the secret to losing weight for me. It's to eat less and exercise more. The reason why I'm not losing weight is because I'm not eating less and I'm not exercising more. I've got to get back to some of the basic stuff. So tools are important, but so is that commitment. The next slide. The other component that's really important to this is teamwork. It's the work that we do as data professionals to engage with the business and help the business understand what it is we can do to help them achieve their goals. And one of the things I often say in order to sort of really beat the living daylights out of my mountaineering analogy is that our goal should be to be Sherpas. It's our job to help the business reach the summit, and not necessarily to look for tons and tons of glory, but to provide our partners in business with the tools and the insights that they need in order to make it to the top. So in order to sort of summarize the message, the next slide focuses on 4 essential and basic things that we need to commit to in order to achieve insight nirvana. And this is what we need to do to first get to the point where we believe we've got a mature and capable approach to MDM, and then of course to be able to start exploiting the benefits of that work that we've done. And it starts with agreeing where we want to be. The truth is, we don't want to be at the summit of Everest in Nepal. We've got different business goals, and let's be clear about what those goals are. And then do the fitness check. And this is, this is a tough experience. Every January I rejoin the gym, and someone who is absurdly fit assesses my level of fitness and tells me what I probably already knew. This is going to require us to be honest with ourselves, to be challenging with ourselves. But the focus here is to understand what we've got at our disposal and to start developing ideas about what we can do to assemble that together as part of a broader MDM strategy in order to forge ahead and deliver that improved knowledge to the business. Eating your greens and getting fit is about doing that whole array of different activities and things which are fundamentally about bringing the data to a level of quality such that there's trust in it, people believe in its timeliness, people believe in its provenance. And of course, as we've started that journey, as we've begun this process of getting fit, we're deploying technology to help us. And this technology, when pointed in the right direction, is going to be a significant help to us. It's going to take time out of the process. It's going to make the process more predictable and reliable and repeatable. But always remember, there's no point in having a silver bullet in your pistol if you point the pistol at your foot. We should be aiming at problems and focusing on what we need to improve and change. And finally, of course, it's, having done that groundwork, we need to really make it real and shoot for the summit, which is fundamentally about making sure that every piece of work that we do, every ounce of effort that we invest in our data strategy and our approach to MDM is fundamentally about delivering the insight that the business needs and in providing that insight when the business needs it, and just as importantly, in the context and prepared for the format that the business needs it. So mobile workers aren't going to get a great deal of deep joy out of vast spreadsheets. Can we give them something that they can see on their mobile device? So this is by way of roundup, MDM is a key destination in order to help us better understand where we are, how we're going to get where we want to go, And there's a process that we all need to go through in order to achieve the level of fitness that we need to in order to achieve the results that MDM can certainly bring us as organizations. So now I'll hand you back to Dave, but I'll be here for the rest of the session and will be available to answer any questions that you guys put forward.
Thanks very much for that, Gary. Some really useful insights there, and some great analogies along the way. I'm now actually going to pass you over to An Chan Phung, who's going to take us through his thoughts on the research report that I'm sure you're all aware of that precedes this webinar, building up to really talking through our checklist for MDM success. So over to you, Chan.
Thanks for that, David, and thanks very much for Gary for presenting your thoughts about MDM and the landscape that everybody is dealing with at the moment. And my name's Chan Phung, so thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to our webinar today. And rather strangely, I quite like broccoli, so maybe that's why I got into the MDM space. But as Gary was talking about, there's a lot of MDM out there where the scope and the size of MDM projects can vary between various organizations. And this is why it's important for us to have a framework. So the first slide we see here is, why do we need a framework for successful MDM projects? And this is really because we have outcomes. Now, the outcomes you see on the slide go from, vary from innovation, which is a positive use of data, through to managing risk, which is much more data being a liability. So is your data really an asset of your organization, or is it a liability? Well, actually, data is actually both. It just depends on how you're using that. And ultimately, it's about using your data in the most appropriate manner. So the importance of having a framework to govern your MDM projects really allows you to have repeatability. So there's a lot of organizations that have done MDM before, and there is a reputation for it being very, very difficult to implement. And this is because MDM is not really just a technology. And MDM is not a destination. You don't implement MDM just for the sake of having an MDM solution. MDM is really the journey that you go through to get to an endpoint. So you need to understand what that endpoint is. And I think that point was made very, very well by Gary and his slides earlier. So if MDM is not a technology, it's really a combination of both technology and business processes. So you really need to embrace MDM as being almost a cultural change within your organization. I mean, one of the questions that we ask very, very regularly to a lot of our customers is, whose responsibility is it for the data? Is data quality an issue for the people capturing the information? Is it more of an issue for the people rationalizing the information in the background? Or is it the people that consume the information? Is it their responsibility to ensure that it's accurate and it's up to date? Well, one of the key things that we found is that data is always fit for purpose. So when you capture that information, it's not always for the purposes of MDM. So trying to get people bought into it is not just a case of having an MDM program in place. You really need to use it. You really need to have the whole business engineered around the MDM philosophy. So if we can have a repeatable solution where we can take some of our learnings from other MDM projects, it means that we can be a lot more predictable in terms of deploying an MDM solution. And part of that is also defining the scope. So one of the points that Gary made very, very well is you don't always understand the scope when you first embark on this journey. Quite often you think, there's maybe 4 or 5 key systems that we need to integrate together, but when you look and dig into your infrastructure, you'll find there's hundreds of systems, some of them, mission critical, that gather a lot of good information, which are either going to be an asset for your organization or it's going to be a liability, but you still have an obligation to manage that information. So trying to identify that scope and having the processes around to identify the scope of your MDM project is very, very important. And ultimately, having a framework approach to an MDM project really allows you to reduce risk and really allows you to have a successful MDM project at the minimum risk that we can. So moving on to the next slide, what I really want to do is really go over the results of the survey that we went through with over 150 MDM specialists and IT decision makers with experience with MDM to really look at what their views are. And I'll present my insight to some of these figures as well. So one of the key things that you see on this slide is just looking at where you are in the maturity model. So looking at the 150 people we surveyed, you can see almost 2/3 of those have already invested or in the process of investing in an MDM platform. So that tells you that the maturity of this market has already come to a point where more than half of the, in fact almost 2/3 of people are really understand MDM, and it's quite getting to a mature market. Now of that, you can also see that 5% of the people who've implemented MDM really see that as being unsuccessful. And there's a lot of different reasons behind that, but you can actually see it's not actually a massive percentage of the overall people who've made decisions in going down an MDM route. So a 5% failure rate is actually it's not all that bad. But that then leads to the question, well, what then defines what is a successful implementation versus one which has failed? And this is all about what you're using MDM for. So the end state, again, is not MDM. The end state is what you're trying to deliver through MDM. And the definition of failure is if you don't manage to get that to that end state. And the transition from having no MDM solution in place to having one in place is not binary. It doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey that you go through. So when you start with your MDM implementation, there's lots of things that you just don't know. And this is why the framework's important, to give you some of the learnings that other people have gone through, so you can ask the relevant questions and get the right people bought in so that your MDM deployment is much more successful. If we move on to the next slide. Basically, this slide is really looking at the motives of why people actually invest in MDM in the first place. So MDM technology is being still fairly new, relatively speaking, has an associated cost of it, and it's very easy for us to put a dollar value on MDM projects, but the dollar value really comes into not just license cost, but also the total cost of ownership of any solution. So this includes the deployment dollars that you need to put in, invest in, both from your technology vendor and your own internal staff to make sure this works. There's also the change in your operational processes to embrace MDM and put MDM in line with your day-to-day working, your business as usual. And there's always the cost in terms of the ongoing cost of any investment that you need to make in terms of data stewards or people that look after the system. So all that really counts into your total cost of ownership for the solution. But so the motives that we have in investing in MDM really has to outweigh that. And you'll see here a list of all of the responses that we got from our 150 respondees. And what you'll find here is that there's lots of different reasons for why people invest in MDM. But if you add up all those numbers together, that comes up to about 250%. So on average, people are deriving more than one benefit, on average about 2.5 benefits for having an MDM platform in place. And this is just where they are on the journey. Our view for MDM is that as you start maturing and your MDM solution starts maturing, that percentage will start going up. You'll be able to see a lot more benefits coming from your MDM platform. Ultimately, we're seeing a lot of people who invest in MDM because they understand that the concept of data being both an asset and a liability. You want to reduce the liability while increasing the value of your assets. And MDM is one way of actually doing that. But another thing we can see with this is it's not always about IT. It's not, you know, some of the benefits that you'll see here, it's not IT driven. It's all driven from the business. So MDM really has to have its roots within the business and really has to be driven from the business. And it's a very clear distinction between those two. So when we implement MDM solutions, we really want the business processes to really drive the whole engagement. So you shouldn't design your business processes over limitations that your MDM platform has. It should really be the other way around. MDM should be there to make the best of your business processes and actually make them more efficient. So moving over to the next slide. This is some of the key challenges that people have seen when making the business case for MDM. And you'll see there's various reasons of why people are thinking it's very, very difficult to actually build the business case. But the two areas that I want to highlight is really the one at the top, which is the lack of tangible evidence of cost savings, and the one about 2/3 down, which is the lack of executive support. So you can see there's one at 43% and one at 20%. Now in our experience, the lack of executive support is actually one of the key critical factors in why an MDM solution just doesn't get off the ground. So you invest and you start moving up, but there's a lack of executive support where doing things like data sharing starts being very, very difficult. And if you don't have the support from the top down, then it does start creating a lot of challenges in deploying MDM. Now, the reason why I've attracted your attention to both those points is because those are the points that you can have some influence on. You know, if the business prioritizes other data domains, for example, or if there's multiple line of business stakeholders, there's very little you can do to actually affect that. In fact, you know, multiple line of business stakeholders is actually quite a positive thing. You know, if there's lots of people being involved in the whole MDM program, that generally means you're going to derive more value from your MDM deployment than having it bound to a single department or a single stakeholder. Insufficient budget, you know, budgets are pretty much constrained. You're not going to magic it, you know, money out of the air. So again, there's very little influence you can have on that. But you can influence executive support. You know, if you engage them early enough in the process, get them brought into the vision, and get their support in. So you need to articulate very clearly what the benefits are going to be that help them do their role. And similarly, for the lack of tangible evidence of cost savings, there's a lot of studies out there which allow you to look at what the use case you're using MDM for and actually put in dollar terms or pound terms what the return you're going to get on that. And that's everything from understanding what the cost savings are in terms of your streamlining your processes, out to, you know, proper tangible dollar savings in terms of either doing channel shift or fraud or debt prevention, for example. So there are ways that, you know, those two key ways are the ways that you can really help make the business case for MDM a lot easier. So moving on, we wanted to then talk about the business impact of it. So when we surveyed the panelists, you can see some of the responses here, and they're fairly, it's really what we expected. So you can really see that, you know, missing, incomplete, inaccurate data could really negatively impact customer experience. So that's a good instance of bad data being a liability. And to be honest, I expected that number to be higher. I can't believe that missing, incomplete, or incorrect data won't negatively impact customer experience. It should in some form. They may just not have experienced that as yet. Obviously, looking at the other side of that, 73%, you know, see their data as also being an asset. So you've got cross-sell opportunities and upsell opportunities that if your data was in the right shape, you can actually leverage that as a way to really increase the growth of your business. 84% obviously believe that data is critical to effective business processes, and this is really going towards where businesses are much more data-driven now. They're no longer process-driven. We can react to the customer a lot better based on what we know about them and all of the ecosystem. So ecosystem is a very important word there, because you'll hear a lot of talk about, you know, being customer-centric, but the customer doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in a much bigger ecosystem, and any changes to that ecosystem has an effect on your customer. So when you embark on your MDM journey and you're looking at customer centricity, you need to look at what the other factors that affect it. You know, things like householding, things like if there's particular assets or anything which is affecting the particular customer, you need to know about those things. So mastering that information is very, very important. And finally, you can see that only 10% disagreed that a single customer view is fundamental for driving top-line growth. So you can see that where data is and the single view of the customer is really having a massive impact on how a particular company will grow and really extend into the future. So you really need to have this as part of the foundational piece of your data strategy. So moving on, what we want to then understand is really what are the business questions that you're trying to answer. And this comes back to the point we raised earlier about MDM, or it's not really a destination. You need to know where you want to go. Is it going to be fraud? Is it going to be channel shifting? Is it going to be upsell and cross-sell opportunities? So having to know which questions you want to ask is absolutely critical for an MDM deployment. So we need to understand well, what we're trying to do with the technology in the first place. What is our end goal for it? And here you can see the variances in terms of the number of questions. There's lots of different questions that you can ask of your data once you've got that single view put together. And this is quite a paradigm shift for a lot of organizations where some of these questions they just wouldn't be able to answer very effectively at all, or it would be a very large manual process to be able to get that information together and have those answers for their strategic goals and their tactical goals. And the next slide really talks about the gap in the processes. So here we've got a nice graphic about, I'm sure you're all familiar with the London Underground, but really there is a gap between the people and the processes that you currently have. One of the interesting statistics that we had was 43% of the people that we surveyed said that their line of business users were reluctant to share data internally. So they're very much a siloed approach to their information. And we see that fairly commonly across the user base. And part of that is because you don't understand the scope at the outset. So the business users don't understand what you're trying to do with it. For them, they're just almost letting their data go out into the wild. And they start becoming liable for data, which wasn't really captured for that purpose in the first place. So there's a reluctance for line of business users to actually share that data, even internally within the organization. Never mind, exposing that information externally to external organizations that may want to leverage your data. So 45% of the people we sampled also said that their organization is fragmented with different divisions dealing with their data with very little overall consensus. So this is where people are making decisions about data over data that they don't know where the source comes from, they don't know how trustworthy it is. So you really need to have a process and a strategy in place to manage both of those things. So one, have the data sharing available to people, but two, also make it transparent so people understand where the data came from, how trustworthy it is, and what I should be able to do with it. So master data management is a good platform to help you to do both of those things. And one of the things that we found out when we're bridging this gap between the people and processes is that MDM process is more than technology. You can't just put in technology to fix all of this. You need to embrace MDM as really being as a mindset that you go down, and it fundamentally changes how you deal with data and how data is captured and what the purpose you're capturing data at every single one of your touch points that your customers may have. So moving on. When we surveyed the panelists, you can also see that there was a 58% of the people who think that they can get a single customer view based on investing in CRM technology. And this is one of the myths that we see, pretty much proliferate through a lot of organizations, that we're going to do everything through CRM. Therefore, I should be able to get the single customer view through my CRM technology. And I think CRM vendors are starting to understand that as well. So you'll see a lot of movement from people like Sociable, like Microsoft, who are building in, a sort of MDM-like capability inside their CRM technology. In fact, it was Gartner that said that by 2018, 40% of CRM and ERP customers will demand solutions that embed MDM capabilities. There's also another paper written by Gartner which talked about MDM being the secret sauce for CRM, and really exposing why a lot of CRM deployments in the past really hasn't really delivered what they promised. And this is because they're not obtaining the single customer view. And it goes beyond just the customer view. CRM has the capability of holding much more business entities. And it's about mastering all of those things. And it comes back to that ecosystem I talked about earlier. All of those business objects that you deal with interact with each other. So you need to understand if something changes, how does that affect the other things which are connected to it? And CRM is a great way. I mean, the R in CRM was obviously for relationship. And all of your data is related, and you need to understand what those relationships are. And MDM will help you do that. So CRM isn't going to provide you a single view unless everything goes through CRM. There's a lot of other systems out there that need to benefit from the single customer view, your MDM technology, which isn't necessarily connected to your CRM platform. So having a holistic view of your customer across your entire ecosystem is very, very important. So moving on to how we actually plan and deploy the solution. of the panelists we surveyed, you can see a lot of the responses that we got back, and none of these are all that surprising. But the first point that we see, 87% of the considerations think that it should be business-led rather than technology-led, and that for us is just very, very straightforward. It should be, you should understand what the business benefits are of your MDM project before embarking on it. You'd also need to appropriately scope the technology, and again, that's very, very difficult to do up front. Unless you really have a very good handle on all of the data assets that you've got. We find that scope creep is something that is fairly natural within an MDM project. So you'll start off by thinking, these 3 systems are our main systems, and that's the only data that we need to support MDM. And then you'll see there's more systems out there with mission-critical data that you can leverage to either improve data quality or improve the robustness of your data within the organization. So you import those in as well. And it is an incremental growth. There's no difficulty in the scope changing over time. Your MDM technology has to support that. When you go down this incremental approach, it allows you to expand the use of it and get better value for MDM as your business is ready for it. And again, I'm going to reiterate this again. The third point is really about executive sponsorship. I can't stress that enough. That is one of the key things that you need to do. Because MDM changes is not a minor thing. If you really want to leverage and get the best out of your MDM deployment, you really need to get that executive sponsorship into it. And finally, considerations into business processes as well. You need to have processes around about governing how MDM works and have MDM built into your business processes. You can leverage what comes out of your MDM platform. Predictability of service implementation costs, that's pretty straightforward. You need to know what you're paying up front and have that repeatable. And you also want to know whether you're going to take responsibility of your MDM, take ownership of your MDM platform. Is it your data, or are you going to have another vendor actually look after it? So how open is the MDM platform that you're investing in? And there's a couple of points around about the alignment of the broader data governance. Data governance is another whole discipline which is very, very wide in its scope as well. Obviously some overlaps with MDM, and some people will argue that master data management and data governance are all within the one umbrella, and there's a lot of arguments to say that is the case, but they definitely work very, very closely together. So regardless of how data is being mastered, the next evolution from that is then to govern what happens to that data afterwards. So data governance is absolutely critical as part of your MDM strategy. Even if you don't want to implement a technical data governance implementation, you'd certainly need to consider it as part of your overall strategy. And the final point there about data quality, really stalling project progress. Now, again, the respondents said 65% of it said that was the case, and a lot of that will depend on what the data quality is within your data sources. Now, you might not know that up front. Again, it comes back to the point about Donald Rumsfeld. You just don't know what you don't know at the start of your project. So it's not until you start digging into your data that you know whether the data sources are good, whether they're bad, etc. So moving on to the next slide. What we also did was look at the end user priorities when selecting vendors, and the list that you see here is ranked. So the biggest text at the top is where people have found it important. So they found things like the ease of use of the product is important, and that comes back to a point I raised earlier about ownership of the solution. If the product is easy to use, easy to understand, obfuscates a lot of the complexities away from your users, it means that you can take ownership of it a lot more. It means that you don't need to worry about the complexities of master data management and actually get on with just doing business work. And that allows you to own the solution and extend the solution in your own, at your own pace. The next important feature was really integration with existing CRM systems. So despite the fact that a lot of people thought that they could get the single customer view through their CRM, they also thought that it was important that MDM supports their CRM deployment. And ultimately, I think that's how they think that they will get that single customer view through CRM, is by linking it through an MDM platform. So obviously linking with a CRM system is important because CRM tends to be the front end. That's where people will leverage the most benefit from the MDM platform. So it's very important that we have those two platforms synchronizing information and talking seamlessly between each other. They were also very important points raised around the flexibility of deployment and license options as well. So because MDM is so mission critical, you don't want to be tied into a product which is really going to cripple the organization financially. So if the licensing options don't scale the way your business scales, then you have a problem there. And similarly for deployment, if we can't go ahead and deploy this technology ourselves, and it's very difficult for us to extend the solution, then that's going to raise the total cost of ownership for us. We also want to deal with multiple domains, so this looks at the extensibility of the solution. You want the solution to really be able to be extendable, so that we can, or the organization can really look at those, the platform and extend it themselves. Obviously things like pricing transparency, rapid time to value, industry experience, return on investment, all those things are just good practices that when you're evaluating a vendor, those are things that they really need to provide to your organization. So moving forward, this is our sort of response to that. So when we look at VisionWare's approach to MDM, we really try to look at it as an overall solution. So looking at things like time to value, ease of use, our product really been engineered around about that principle. We have integration with CRM out of the box with the solution as well. So we understand that use case very, very well, and we understand how MDM and CRM can work seamlessly together. We're also very, very flexible in terms of licensing, deployment options. We have price transparency through the various frameworks that we have within our solution. We'll give you a fixed price for not just the license cost, but also we're so adamant about our predictability and repeatability of our implementation that we can give you a fixed cost in terms of the deployment there as well. We also talked about data governance and the MDM platform sort of running side by side. So we would support your data stewardship and your data governance strategy as well. So we have a lot of experience actually implementing those for multiple end customers. Flexibility and scalability is obviously, as your business grows, you want to be able to have the solution fit in with that. So those are two areas that we constantly invest in all the time in our products. We also have very deep industry expertise, so we understand about business, we understand your use cases, and understand how you can leverage MDM to really get the most out of the investment that you have. And final 2 points really around about services requirements and helping you do data migrations as well. Those are 2 key points that we do very, very regularly for a lot of our customers. So the VisionWare approach is, we've done this a lot of times. We want to try and help you go through that transition because we've got a lot of experience in this area. And this is because VisionWare is just a master data management company. We don't do anything else. We don't create CRM systems. We don't do enterprise service buses. We do master data management, do it very, very well. And just moving on to the next slide, I just want to give you an example of some of the successful project outcomes that we've had. At the top there, you can see that we had a leading international health insurance company use MDM to underpin system consolidation. And this is really around about the complexities of their organization. They were providing insurance services, they were providing sales, as well as delivery of service and support as well. So all 4 of those various organizations needed to combine together so that as you're tracking the customer through their customer experience of going through the sales process and then them actually having a policy and being insured, having any claims, through to the delivery of health services to that individual and any supporting any of their needs as well or any of their complaints. It was important for them to get that single view of that customer so that they can really have much higher retention rates and also grow their business as well. We have the second one down there is about Dollar Financial. This is a company who used MDM as part of their mergers and acquisitions activity so that they can compare their customer base, their existing customer base, against those of companies that they're about to invest in. So they can see, well, are we actually investing in net new customers, or do we already have these customers and all we're doing is investing in the name and the infrastructure for that particular company. We also have an insurance broker that was using Multi to really underpin their customer-centric initiative. And they really wanted to use it as an upsell and cross-sell tool. But they also wanted it to manage their internal competition. So what they had was multiple brands within the same organization who was competing with each other. and actually really lowering the price of their of the service that they deliver by competing against their own brands. So they wanted to at least understand how much that's affecting them. And finally there you can see the London Borough of Enfield really using it for a lot of different things, from single view of the debt to children at risk. And that's a great example where you've got benefits that you can both quantify in terms of hard cash savings, as well as much more of a quality type benefit, you know, identifying children at risk and understanding how it can really improve that. So last thing I'm just going to cover about the some of the checklists that you should really go through. So if we just move through to the next slide, please. There's a lot, you know, you'll get copies of this slide and obviously the presentation, but I wanted just to draw your attention to a few of these points. One is really about building the vision aligned to the business needs. So really understand where you're going to go. You know, taking the mountaineering analogy, we don't want to climb the wrong mountain. We want to make sure that we're climbing the one that we've set out to climb. So making sure that vision is absolutely crystal clear and also shared across the rest of the business, so everybody knows which mountain they're climbing and why it's important for your business to do that. The second internal consideration to talk about is really the securing the executive sponsorship. Now, I've talked a lot about that in the last half hour or so, but I can't stress enough how important that is. Really try and get that early on in the process so that you've got somebody who can really push the project if it comes to any hurdles. In terms of external considerations, you really need to understand the level of services, implementation cost, effort, etc. So you get an understanding of what the total cost of ownership is for your overall platform, because that's what you're investing in. There's no point going into a platform that looks cheap in terms of the license cost, but ultimately you can't afford it because the total cost of ownership is far too high for your organization to consume. And finally, we want to really focus on the scope and really thoroughly prove the concept to build that momentum. So when you engage on any MDM project, there'll be a few low-hanging fruit that you can get very easily. You know, there'll be some immediate MDM challenges that you have in your business right now. And it's important to really see what you can do with the technology first. And quite commonly we can see just by pulling information together, doing a proof of concept, it really invigorates the buy-in from your company. So do consider that as being a possible way to get buy-in for your MDM platform. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to David. That basically finishes up my portion of the presentation. But if there's any questions, I think we've got some time left at the end for that.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Chan. Really nicely structured session. What we're going to do now is move on to some Q&A. We've had a few questions come in over the course of the webinar so far. So the first one here, and I'm going to push this one to Gary. I mean, you both laboured on this point a reasonable amount, but I guess it's more the practicalities of getting there. And the question is, how should I go about getting support from the business? Gary?
David, thank you. This is arguably the hardest part of doing this. I mean, it does vary. So I have plenty of clients where, in fact, the business is coming to IT and demanding this this information. But it's fundamentally it's about making a commitment to properly engage with the business. And you know, this isn't about sending a questionnaire or, you know, a surveying via email. This is about getting face-to-face in a room with the business and talking to them about what is stopping them being successful. What are the key things they need to know? Just by having that conversation, you're convincing the business that you care and that you're interested in helping them. And by starting in that mode and more importantly making a point of remembering to check back with the business that the direction you're going in is right, it's arguably the most important thing we can do outside selecting the right technology platform upon which to base our MDM solution. When I talk to clients about why projects fail, in fairness, it's almost never the technology that's at fault. projects fail because we fail to engage effectively with the business. So for me, that's where you start. You start with engagement, and if the business is on your side, they'll help you make the case.
Okay, great. That's a good point. And so I think this one's potentially slightly linked here. Is saying, what are the key things I need to think about in order to begin this process? So in terms of, I'm guessing, that begin the broader process of scoping out an MDM project, and I guess a lot of it's been covered. But what would you say is the number one thing, Gary, other than executive support? Because we've covered that off. I won't let you cheat.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of so. I mean, it's this classic. It's that fitness check that I talked about in my part of the presentation. It's making sure that as you embark on this journey, you know what resources you currently have available, you understand the quality of those resources, that you've done the necessary work to find those additional pockets of data, those unknown knowns, so that you can start with your eyes completely open about the challenge that you face. It's easy to kick these things off by going for the kind of the famous low-hanging fruit. But the problem with that is it doesn't teach you anything about how to get to the high-hanging fruit. So part of this is to really properly understand the challenge, so that you're not either disappointed or surprised as things go on. That's the boring stuff I alluded to. It's auditing, it's checking the provenance, it's understanding how this data was manufactured, where's it derived from, and then you can start laying out the key milestones that you want to achieve, and you can start then having the meaningful conversations that you need to have with the business about why each milestone is worth reaching, why the investment is worthwhile. But it starts with a very honest and basic analysis of where you are.
Great, Chan. If you had to give one bit of advice, Chan, in terms of things to think about before you kick off an MDM, what would you say other than exec support as well?
Yeah, obviously executive support is important, and one of the ways that we can do that is just to show rapid return very, very quickly. So the point about having, taking data sets, linking it together, and showing the principles of it.
Yep.
So one of the points that Gary raised was that you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So understanding the scope and doing it incrementally is often very, very critical in helping people understand that.
Well, I guess there's one thing in getting that executive support, but there's another thing in keeping executive support, and there's a lot to be said for kind of building momentum as you go, right?
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's a hugely important point, David, in the context. A lot of projects start with a fair amount of sort of fanfare and a fair amount of enthusiasm for the business, and sometimes you'll get 6 to 9 months in, and your business sponsors phoned you up for the 3rd time in a row to say he can't make the update meeting because something urgent has come up. That's a time when if you sense that the relationship is drifting, that's time to reinvest in developing or reasserting the relationship. So quite often these things start with a lot of business enthusiasm, and it kind of tails off, and you need to watch out for that, because projects can get very, very lonely when the if the executive enthusiasm declines.
That's great. Okay. Finally, just one final one that seems to have just come in here. So this one's actually going to be probably more for Chan, I think. Talked a bit around proof of concept towards the end. What would be involved in a typical proof of concept with VisionWare? I think this is more about how would we structure kind of the approach there, Chan.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So proof of concepts can obviously vary depending on what you're trying to prove. A lot of it is just understanding what your data quality is on your data sources, and with the platform that we've got, one of the key benefits that we have within the platform is just the ease of deployment and the ease of implementing the system in a standalone fashion. So one of the key things that we can do for a proof of concept is just take information from a number of different systems, crunch it through our platform, and basically produce a set of reports that tell you how good or bad your data is, and understand the scope of your actual project. So that's typically a 10-day engagement for us, so it's not a huge engagement. There's no real cost in terms of the license cost. It's just a service engagement to really understand more about how MDM can really help your organization.
Great, that's brilliant. Well, I think actually we've just slightly overrun there, so that's all we've got time for today. I just want to thank everyone on the line for joining this session, and pass on my thanks also on their behalf to our speakers today. If you do have any further questions or comments regarding this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us, primarily on inquiries@visionware.com, and we hope to see you on another VisionWare webinar very soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.